Hello, everybody. My name is Leonidas, and over the course of the next 15 minutes, I will be debunking the flat Bitcoin theory. But first, we need to explore Bitcoin's history and the events that led up to the creation of the flat Bitcoin theory. So, back in January of 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto mined the Genesis block for Bitcoin. And in that block, he did the first ever activity on Bitcoin, which was storing a newspaper headline directly in the Coinbase transaction. So actually, the first use case of Bitcoin ever was not a monetary transfer of value. That happened 8 days later when Satoshi sent some Bitcoin to Hal Finney. It was actually storing a inscription into Bitcoin. So several years later, as a tribute to Lynn Sassaman, there was some ASCII art that was also inscribed into Bitcoin. And we also have a JPEG that was inscribed into Bitcoin in a lovely way, stored across hundreds of Bitcoin addresses. And lots of other notable things over the years have been inscribed into Bitcoin, obviously, leading up to the 100 million inscriptions we've done as of recent. Also, in the early days of Bitcoin, people were doing time stamping. So in December of 2010, Hal Finney introduced this idea to basically use the Bitcoin blockchain to timestamp important documents. And Satoshi replied that I like Hal Finney's idea for using for user-friendly timestamping, converting the hash of a file into a Bitcoin address and sending 0.01 BCC to it. And then, yes, in May of 2013, this idea was brought to life as the proof of existence protocol by Manuel Aruez, who basically has been storing documents, hashes of documents on Bitcoin up until this day. There were some stored yesterday, for example. So this has been happening for a very long time. Another notable use case for Bitcoin in its early days was Satoshi Dice, which was a basically gambling platform launched by Eric Voorhees. You could send some Bitcoin to a specific address, and then the result, if you won or not, was determined by the transaction ID of the hash. And then if you won, the server sent you back the winnings. If not, you only got a little bit of BTC back, just letting you know that you lost. Turned out this was an extremely popular use case of Bitcoin in the early days. So literally over half of Bitcoin's transaction volume was people playing Satoshi Dice for about a year and a half. It was a very popular way to bootstrap the Bitcoin network, and it was quite early kind of crypto degeneracy happening. Okay, fast forward a little bit here. So 2012, this concept of colored coins by Yanni Assi, who's the founder and CEO of eToro, comes about. He basically proposes a way saying, hey, let's launch tokens on Bitcoin. Let's have other tokens on Bitcoin other than BTC. This gets turned into a formal white paper by Minnie Rosenfeld in 2013, a year later. And then by 2014, there is a implementation of this. It's a meta protocol on Bitcoin. There is the Coin Prism wallet and indexer that's released by Flavian Charlin. And as you can see, we've got some lovely, very early meme coins here on Bitcoin. Now in 2014, October of 2014, we get Real Coin. So Reeve Collins, Brock Pierce, and Craig Sellers issue Real Coin, a one-to-one backed USD token on Mastercoin, which is another meta protocol for issuing tokens on Bitcoin L1. This became the first stable coin ever. The name was then changed to Tether a month later. Also in 2014, Counterparty goes live, another meta protocol for issuing tokens on Bitcoin L1. Lots of innovation was packed in here. So this is what you're looking at here is the first DEX ever. Not just on Bitcoin ever. The first DEX was on Bitcoin. You also had the birth of some on-chain voting and governance protocols. Early DAO primitives basically happened on Counterparty. And then 2015, we get the birth of NFTs. So this is a Spells of Genesis card. It was an early trading card game that tokenized the in-game asset, the first time that had ever happened. Saratobi on the right there is the first play-to-earn game ever, also issued as NFTs on the Counterparty protocol on Bitcoin. And then in 2016, we get the birth of the crypto art movement with Rare Pepes, and crypto art kind of kicks off and continues to grow. So obviously, we've had lots of innovation on Bitcoin in the early days. I think that's pretty clearly established at this point. Now, that innovation didn't come without tension. So there were, many Bitcoin developers who tried to culturally label the non-monetary use cases as spam and harassed and tried to make this activity not welcome by threatening to remove op return, which was basically the place in the Bitcoin blockchain where a lot of these protocols were storing their arbitrary data. It's how they were able to work with Bitcoin. And the counterparty team, in response to this, wrote an open letter to Bitcoin Core, which is summarized well by Adam, which basically he says Bitcoin developers are trying to prevent us from using the protocol as it stands with all of the flexibility that it naturally provides. Adam is not asking for forks or anything fancy. He just wants to use Bitcoin. Several years later, we see Vitalik give his recollection of this period of time at the op return wars, and he says the very earliest versions of ETH protocol were a counterparty style meta coin on top of Primecoin, not Bitcoin, because the op return wars were happening at the time. And given what certain core devs were saying at the time, I was scared that protocol rules would change under me, example, by banning certain ways to encode data and transactions to make it harder, and I did not want to build on a base protocol whose dev team would be at war with me. So in summary, the Bitcoiners who just wanted to use BTC as the only use case of the Bitcoin network essentially won. They were able to scare everyone away, and we end up with the flat Bitcoin theory. So basically the period, I would say, starting in about 2015, 2016, going through 2022, there is what I would consider largely a stagnation of innovation on the Bitcoin network. All of the dApps, all of the early cool things we just talked about, that the momentum for that, the developers who are interested in experimenting with blockchains, they moved off of Bitcoin, they created Ethereum, they created dApps and NFTs on other chains. So yeah, basically, pretty much that period of time was, I would consider, like a somewhat boring time in Bitcoin. People just focused on BTC and price and some conflicts around block size. And the end result was that it produced a giant psyop that Bitcoin is technically not capable of doing advanced blockchain use cases like Ethereum can, for example. This is largely perpetuated. Essentially, everybody who knows anything about blockchain in the entire world is basically a flat Bitcoiner and thinks of Bitcoin as this boring blockchain that can't do anything interesting. And Ethereum and Solana and these other blockchains that are general purpose can do all sorts of cool things, and they're more technically capable and sophisticated. And the Ethereum ecosystem was financially incentivized to perpetuate this narrative that you can only do dApps and programmability on Ethereum. And the Bitcoin maxis, the Bitcoin core, let that narrative flourish because they didn't want people doing these things on Bitcoin. So then the end result is basically everyone thinks that Bitcoin is this blockchain that can't do anything, okay? And then that is up until January of 2023, when this guy, Casey Rodamore, enters the scene, drops Ordinals into Bitcoin, opens this can of worms, and essentially starts a renaissance of experimentation on Bitcoin. And the emergence of Ordinals basically started a chain reaction that took flat Bitcoiners, like myself somewhat, and started opening our eyes that we had been told a lie and that Bitcoin was in fact multidimensional. Okay, so hopefully you noticed the work I did to make it a sphere there. So Bitcoin is in fact a sphere. It's multidimensional. It's capable of everything that Ethereum can do. It's capable of everything Solana can do. Maybe it's a little slower, but you can do these things on Bitcoin. Since then, we have Jeremy from DotSwap has defied all of the FUD, delivered a trustless liquidity pool style experience on Bitcoin L1 for runes with zero MEV. Stan from Sats Terminal has built an advanced order routing and aggregation engine for runes trading directly on Bitcoin L1. Scott from RadFi, he's revived the runes trenches with a token launchpad on Bitcoin L1 that thousands of people use every day. Robin from Liquidium, he built a runes and ordinals lending protocol that has processed hundreds of millions of dollars of volume and proves that DeFi can thrive on Bitcoin L1. The Bitcoin DeFi dream is alive once again. Domo, Binari from BRC 2.0, and Taga from Alkanes are all relentlessly pursuing a vision for general purpose smart contracts directly on Bitcoin L1. Trevor from Pizza Ninjas built a fully on-chain multiplayer game that a ton of people played with and still play. And this game was directly on Bitcoin L1. This was not on Ethereum. This was not on Solana, not on L2, on Bitcoin L1, the entire thing. Ken from Experts built a Bitcoin wallet for interacting with Bitcoin L1 dApps that is so sleek that it puts Ethereum's flagship MetaMask wallet to shame. I cannot emphasize enough how bad of an experience I had coming to Bitcoin after leaving it like 8 years earlier, coming back, still seeing that it's the same wallets that people are using. Thank you, Ken, for building Experts. Okay. Danny Yang from On-Chain Monkey pioneered a new way to store an entire 10K PFP collection directly on the Bitcoin blockchain for only $23. This is now a widely adopted way to store collections and art on Bitcoin. Surge formed the Bitcoin Art Society to preserve Bitcoin's on-chain culture for future generations. VCs like Tyler, Tim, Adrian, Trevor, Jason, Kevin, and many, many more are undeterred by their flat Bitcoiner friends and are funding the next wave of billion-dollar applications and protocols that are being built on Bitcoin. Jan has dedicated months of his life. I've watched this guy. He is working so hard, Jan. I'm so proud of you, to ensure that once a year there is a place where Bitcoin builders can gather together to celebrate experimentation on Bitcoin. And basically, now we also have this group of degens, these massive decentralized communities like the Dog Army, like the Bitcoin Puppets, that have rallied together to support these innovations and champion the Bitcoin ecosystem. I truly believe that if there were 1,000 parallel universes, in 999 of them, they are absolutely laughing at us at how insane it is that the rest of crypto is leveraging the largest, most secure, most globally recognized, most decentralized network for their dApps. And instead of doing that, we got psyoped into building these tinier, more fragile, centralized blockchains because we didn't think that Bitcoin could do anything because we were flat Bitcoiners for the past 8 years. So I'm here to share the truth that Bitcoin is capable of everything you could possibly imagine and more. The first NFTs and crypto art started on Bitcoin. The first meme coin started on Bitcoin. The first stable coins and real world assets started on Bitcoin. The first dApp started on Bitcoin. The first DEX started on Bitcoin. The first on-chain governance started on Bitcoin. And the first crypto degens were playing Satoshi Dice on Bitcoin. We have now entered into a renaissance of experimentation and innovation on Bitcoin, with new builders picking up where the early builders left off. The builders I mentioned today are only a small fraction. There are so many people that are just working tirelessly to bring this vision of giant on-chain economy on Bitcoin, leveraging the Bitcoin network to secure the financial future of human civilization. This is about building a more secure and more robust Bitcoin network long-term. Bitcoin is better when it is winning at developer mindshare, when blocks are filled with a diverse set of on-chain activity. So pull your heads out of the sand, shake off your underdog mentality, and go build the most powerful, compelling applications you can possibly dream of, all on top of the first and most badass blockchain ever created. This is my speech today. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. Thank you for listening.